Someone lied to you this week. Maybe you believed them. Maybe you didn't. But here's the problem. You were probably listening to their words while ignoring everything happening around those words. Professional interviewers don't rely on one nervous gesture or some magical liar tell. They look for something more useful. Change. Because when the stakes change, behavior can change with them. And today, you're going to learn a three-step framework for noticing those changes without relying on guesswork. This is MindWire. And once you learn the framework, you'll start noticing things in conversations you used to completely miss. You've probably seen the usual advice. Watch their eyes. They touched their face. They looked away. They crossed their arms. They're lying. It sounds convincing. It's also one of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to read others. There is no single body language gesture that reliably proves someone is lying. People behave differently when they're nervous, uncomfortable, excited, confused, embarrassed, or under pressure. So professional behavioral analysis starts somewhere else. Context. And before you interpret a behavior, you need to know what normal looks like for that person. Think about it. If someone normally talks with their hands, suddenly moving their hands tells you very little. But if someone who normally sits completely still suddenly starts moving constantly when a particular subject comes up, now you have something worth investigating. Not proof. A signal. And that's the difference between reading people and playing detective in your own imagination. Lesson 1. Establish the baseline. Before you look for unusual behavior, learn what ordinary behavior looks like. How quickly do they normally speak? How much eye contact do they naturally use? Do they gesture constantly? Do they sit forward or lean back? Do they pause before answering difficult questions? You don't need to interrogate someone to notice these things. Just pay attention during ordinary conversation, because a behavior only becomes interesting when you have something to compare it against. Imagine your friend normally answers questions immediately. Then you ask about a specific event. Suddenly there's a long pause. Their speech becomes shorter. Their posture changes, and they start rubbing their hands together. Does that mean they're lying? No. It could mean they're uncomfortable. It could mean they're trying to remember. It could mean the question surprised them. Or it could mean you're touching something they don't want to discuss. The behavior gives you a reason to ask better questions. It doesn't give you permission to declare a verdict. That's the first rule. Don't read the gesture. Read the change. Because the most interesting signal isn't always what someone does. It's what they suddenly stop doing. Their normal eye contact changes. Their speech pattern changes. Their posture changes. Their level of detail changes. One change can mean almost anything, but several changes appearing together around the same topic? Now you have a pattern worth exploring. Remember this: I watch the pattern, not the moment. Lesson 2. Stop filling the silence. Most people ask a question and immediately start talking again. They explain why they're asking. They soften the question. They give the other person an escape route. Professional interviewing often works differently. Ask, then listen. Silence creates space for the other person to decide what information they want to provide. And here's where something interesting happens. People often reveal more when they aren't being constantly interrupted. They may add context, correct themselves, clarify a detail, introduce information you never asked about, or change their story. None of those things automatically mean deception, but they give you more information to evaluate. This is where behavioral analysis becomes less about catching a liar and more about understanding how someone communicates under pressure. Try this in your next difficult conversation. Ask, what happened next? Then stop. Don't rescue the silence. Don't suggest the answer. Don't finish their sentence. Just listen. Pay attention to what they volunteer, what they avoid, and whether their account remains consistent as they explain themselves. Because sometimes the most revealing part of a conversation isn't the answer. It's everything surrounding the answer. Remember, I don't chase the truth. I make space for information. Lesson 3. Introduce a little cognitive pressure. Not intimidation. Not manipulation. Just a question that requires the person to think more carefully. For example, instead of asking, "Did you take the money?" you might ask, "Walk me through exactly what happened after you arrived." Now you're asking them to reconstruct a sequence. And as they do, watch for changes. Do they suddenly slow down? Do they become unusually vague? Do they add unnecessary detail? Do they correct themselves? Does their tone change? Does their posture change? Again, none of these proves deception. But a noticeable shift tells you something important. The subject has become more demanding. That is information. You can then ask a follow-up question. Clarify the timeline. Return to the subject later. Compare the answers. This is much more reliable than watching someone's eyes and declaring them guilty. And don't forget something crucial. Truthful people can become nervous too. A completely innocent person can look uncomfortable when questioned aggressively. That's why context matters. You're not searching for a magical lie signal. You're looking for behavioral changes that tell you where to pay closer attention. That's the real skill. The body doesn't always tell you the truth, but it can tell you when something has changed. And sometimes that's enough to ask a better question. So put the 3 steps together. 1. Baseline. Know what normal looks like. 2. Listen. Ask questions and give people room to explain themselves. 3. Watch the shift. When the subject changes, does their behavior change with it? Then add one final rule. Never confuse a signal with proof. That's what separates observation from paranoia. You're not trying to become someone who sees lies everywhere. You're becoming someone who notices when the conversation changes. Because the goal isn't to control people. It's to become harder to mislead. Every time you notice a sudden change in someone's behavior, you don't need to accuse them. You simply pay closer attention. You ask another question, and you let the evidence accumulate. Remember, I notice the change before I make the judgment. If this changed the way you'll read your next conversation, comment. I watch the pattern. Because once you stop searching for isolated tells, people become much more interesting to observe. Subscribe to MindWire for the next breakdown. We're going deeper into the psychology of influence, including how certain questions can change the way people reveal information without realizing it. Like this video. Send it to someone who thinks they're impossible to read. And remember, stay sharp, stay skeptical, stay MindWire.